April 1945. Europe is on fire. The once bustling towns of Germany lie in ruins, smoke curling into a grey, angry sky. The war has scarred everything in its path, leaving rubble-strewn streets and hollowed-out buildings that whisper the stories of lives torn apart. Through the haze, a small platoon of American soldiers moves cautiously, their boots crunching over shattered cobblestones, rifles clutched tightly. They are exhausted, haunted by months of battle, yet driven forward by duty, curiosity, and the faint hope that the war might finally be ending. Private Miller, the youngest in the platoon, stumbles over a loose tile near the mouth of an abandoned salt mine. His flashlight flickers, catching on a glint of metal. "Hey, look at this," he mutters, kneeling to examine it. The others lean in, their breath shallow. The beam of Miller's light reveals something strange. A massive steel door, sealed tight, emblazoned with Nazi markings and cryptic symbols. The air grows heavier, tinged with the metallic scent of oil and rust. The men exchange uneasy glances. No one speaks at first. Captain Emerson steps forward, wiping sweat and grime from his forehead, and studies the door. "What the hell did they hide down here?" he asks, his voice low, tinged with disbelief. Miller swallows, but the clinking of metal from beneath the door seems to answer for him. With careful, tense effort, the platoon pries, bangs, and finally forces the door open. What they see makes them freeze. Rows of gold bars, stacked like bricks of sunlight. Crates labeled with the names of looted museums. And paintings, masterpieces by Rembrandt, Van Gogh, and other stolen treasures, leaning against the walls in silent testimony. Dust motes float in the flashlight beams, as though dancing over a forgotten world. The smell is overpowering, oil, rust, and centuries of hidden secrets. Captain Emerson steps closer, almost afraid to touch anything. His voice barely rises above a whisper. This could change history." The men stare in stunned silence. They had prepared for battle, for death, for chaos, but nothing could have prepared them for this. Behind them, the echoes of collapsing buildings remind them that the world outside is still at war. Inside this vault, however, time feels suspended. Here lies not just gold, but proof of a madness beyond comprehension, Hitler's obsession with art, power, and immortality. Private Miller's hand trembles as he reaches toward a crate. The flickering flashlight catches a glimpse of a family portrait tucked between gold bars, a silent reminder of lives stolen, histories erased. The men realize collectively that what they have uncovered is more than treasure. It is a monument to greed, tyranny, and the darkest ambitions of a dying regime. For a moment the soldiers do not move, as though the weight of history itself presses down on them. Then a distant rumble of collapsing stone reminds them the war has not ended. The vault holds secrets that could rewrite the world's understanding of the Third Reich, if they can survive long enough to bring them into the light. April 1945, the Third Reich teeters on the edge of collapse. Across Germany, cities burn, their skeletal remains silhouetted against a sky streaked with smoke and ash. The sound of distant artillery still cracks through the air, a grim reminder that even as the Allies push deeper, the war is far from over. Civilians flee in every direction, dragging what little they can carry. Children cling to mothers, men scavenge for food, and chaos ripples through towns and villages like wildfire. American intelligence reports had been circulating for weeks. Rumors, at first dismissed as the desperate mutterings of prisoners, that Hitler had ordered vast caches of treasures hidden throughout the countryside, treasures looted from occupied nations, private collectors and Jewish families. Allied units advancing east were cautioned to keep their eyes open for unusual caches, anything out of the ordinary, anything that might reveal the secret ambitions of a dying regime. Most soldiers, hardened by years of combat, shrugged it off. Rumors of hidden gold and stolen art seemed almost fantastical, the stuff of wartime legend. Captain Emerson's platoon had little time to dwell on legends. Exhausted from weeks of relentless marching and firefights, their focus was survival. Faces hollowed by fatigue, eyes scanning every ruin for threats, the men were skeptical, cynical, and hungry for the war to end. For them, the fantasy of Nazi treasure was distant from the grim reality of hunger, gunfire, and the ever-present smell of death. Yet amid the chaos, whispers began to surface. German prisoners, broken and weary, muttered about a vault beneath the salt, a place where the Reich hid what it considered most precious. The soldiers didn't understand it at first. Some laughed nervously, others scowled at the mere mention, warning that the stories were traps designed to lure Allied forces into ambushes. And yet, the repetition of these whispers gnawed at them, a quiet persistence that refused to be ignored. As Emerson led his men through the smoking ruins of a small town near Merkers, the streets themselves seemed to mourn. Bombed-out houses leaned precariously, their walls scorched black. Pavements cracked, debris littering the way like obstacles in a war-torn labyrinth. Every corner, every shadow carried the potential for danger. Snipers, booby traps, or hidden pockets of fanatical German soldiers who would rather die than surrender. The men moved with careful efficiency, boots crunching over rubble, rifles ready, senses heightened by months of relentless vigilance. In the evenings, around the meager fires they were allowed to build, the platoons spoke in low tones. Tales of the war, of near-death experiences, of lost friends, of families left behind. Yet always, the conversation returned to the rumors. "A vault under the salt, huh?" Miller asked, poking at the fire with a stick, sparks flying. "Sounds like one of those old legends, like the Holy Grail." Sergeant Collins, older and grizzled, shook his head. "Legends don't matter. What matters is getting through today alive. That's all." But even he didn't quite dismiss it. There was something in the way the German POWs whispered, fearful, secretive, as if speaking aloud could summon consequences beyond imagination. The march toward Merkers was long, arduous, and fraught with tension. Smoke rose from every horizon, and the smell of death lingered, acrid and inescapable. Yet despite the destruction, there were signs of meticulous German planning. Crates, labeled with coded numbers, hastily buried artifacts and sealed doors tucked away in abandoned buildings, hinted at the Reich's obsession with preserving certain things at all costs. Emerson began to notice patterns, unusual activity in certain towns, roads avoided by retreating soldiers, and especially the consistent rumors about hidden treasures. The men joked, half to lighten the mood, half to mask their unease. But each laugh was hollow, each smile fleeting. They were soldiers trained to fight, yet nothing had prepared them for the sheer scale of human desperation and destruction that met them at every step. And beneath it all was a gnawing curiosity, the silent question, what had the Nazis hidden, and why? Then, as fate would have it, the signs led them to Merkers, a small mining town that had survived relatively intact amidst surrounding ruin. The mine itself had been operational for decades, a sprawling labyrinth of tunnels burrowed deep into the Thuringian salt deposits. For the Germans, it had become a secret repository, a vault where they stashed what they deemed irreplaceable, gold, art and artifacts taken from across Europe. But no one in Emerson's platoon knew this yet. Their first glimpse of the mine was unremarkable. A charred wooden entrance, doors warped by heat, the smell of damp earth and salt thick in the air. Yet there was an odd stillness, a silence that didn't belong in a town still technically at war. It was as if the mine itself were holding its breath, waiting for someone to uncover its secrets. It was inside this silence that whispers of the German POWs suddenly crystallized in their minds. Emerson studied the entrance, recalling the stories, the murmured warnings. He motioned for the men to follow him inside. Every footstep echoed ominously through the salt-laden air. Dust swirled with their every movement, catching the light of their flashlights in ghostly arcs. As they progressed deeper into the tunnels, the air grew colder, heavier, and almost oppressive. It smelled faintly of metal and something older, something long concealed. The soldiers began noticing oddities: reinforced walls, doors without apparent purpose, signs of hurried excavation. Their skepticism faltered, replaced by a tension that mingled excitement with fear. Could this be real? Could they actually be standing on the threshold of something legendary? Private Miller's hand brushed against a smooth steel door ahead. It was unremarkable at first glance, yet somehow it radiated importance. Emerson's instincts, honed through years of combat, told him to pause, to study, to consider the possibilities. "Men," he whispered, "whatever's behind this door, it's not just another cache of supplies." The soldiers exchanged glances. Even the most battle-hardened among them felt a ripple of anticipation. What lay ahead was unknown, but the rumors, the whispers, and the strange, meticulous engineering of the mine all pointed to one chilling possibility. The Germans had hidden something monumental, something beyond imagination, and yet even with this growing awareness, they could not prepare themselves for the shock awaiting them in the darkness ahead, a secret vault that would not only contain wealth but also a disturbing glimpse into the obsessions and ambitions of a regime in its death throes. The mine seemed to breathe around them, walls closing in, darkness stretching into infinity. Every soldier moved cautiously, hearts hammering, senses heightened. Emerson led hand on rifle, eyes scanning, mind racing. The stories of looted art, stolen gold, whispered treasure, until now they were just tales. But something told him that Merkers held the truth, and when the door finally came into view, looming and enigmatic, every soldier understood. This was no ordinary discovery. This was the edge of history, and they were standing at its threshold. The air inside the Merkers salt mine was cold and damp, clinging to the soldier's skin like a second layer. Every breath carried the taste of iron and earth, sharp and acrid. Flashlights pierced the blackness, cutting through the shadows that seemed to writhe along the jagged walls. The tunnels were narrow, oppressive, and silent, save for the echoing footsteps of Emerson's platoon and the occasional drip of water from the salt-encrusted ceiling. The men pressed forward cautiously, senses heightened. Every shadow could conceal danger. Every metallic glint could be a trap. Yet with each step, a strange awe settled over them. This place was unlike any battlefield they had known. It was not designed for war, but for concealment, for secrecy. Every corner, every reinforced wall, every coded marking on the crates hinted at meticulous planning. The Germans had wanted this hidden, and they had succeeded, until now. Private Miller ran a hand along a cold steel door ahead, tracing the embossed Nazi insignia and cryptic codes. "They didn't want anyone here," he murmured almost to himself. The others nodded, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Sergeant Collins muttered, "And yet here we are, stumbling into their little secret." The platoon advanced deeper, encountering crates stacked with precision, each marked with strange alphanumeric codes and insignias of German museums. Some crates were partially open, revealing layers of cloth carefully wrapped around objects whose shapes hinted at priceless art. The smell of old paper and oil mixed with the damp salt air, creating an almost intoxicating sense of history, preserved under lock and secrecy. Emerson surveyed the narrow corridor ahead. A massive reinforced door blocked their path, its steel surface thick, unyielding, as though daring anyone to try breaking it. He exchanged a glance with Collins. "We're going to need explosives," he said quietly, a tension threading his words. No one questioned the decision. The moment demanded action, and hesitation could leave them staring at this threshold forever. Careful preparations followed. Charges were set, detonators wired, and the men took cover, hearts pounding in their chests. Emerson gave the signal. A muffled boom rattled the tunnels, dust and debris spraying into the air. For a tense moment there was only silence, the kind of silence that presses in on you, heavy and almost suffocating. Then slowly, the dust settled. The flashlights revealed the unimaginable gold. Thousands upon thousands of bars, stacked with mathematical precision, glinting even in the weak beams. Crates upon crates of coins, some ancient, some freshly minted. Paintings, carefully wrapped in cloth, leaned against walls. Masterpieces stolen from the occupied countries of Europe. Rembrandt's, Van Gogh's, Goya's. The names alone sent a shiver through the soldiers. Every crate, every pile, radiated a sense of forbidden power. Miller stepped forward, hand trembling as it hovered over a stack of gold bars. The men exchanged awed glances, unable to tear themselves away from the enormity of what lay before them. The sheer scale of it was overwhelming. Over 100 tons of gold, art, and valuables hoarded in meticulous secrecy. Emerson felt a strange mixture of triumph and disbelief. We've found it, he breathed. All of it. Right here. Yet amid the brilliance, something else caught their attention. In a corner of the vault, partially hidden beneath a pile of coins, lay several leather-bound ledger books. Emerson picked one up carefully, brushing away the dust. The pages were filled with lists, names of towns, coded locations, amounts of gold, crates, and artworks. This was no isolated treasure hoard. This was a blueprint, a map of the Reich's secret looting operation, detailing where caches had been hidden across Europe. The soldiers realized the magnitude of their discovery. They were no longer merely stumbling across stolen wealth. They were witnessing the central hub of the Nazi looting network, the very mechanism that had orchestrated one of the largest art thefts in history. The scale was dizzying, the moral weight almost unbearable. Every gold bar and coin carried a story of families displaced, collections stolen, lives destroyed. Collins shook his head slowly. This isn't just treasure. This is proof of what they were willing to do to everything, to build their dream of power. The men absorbed the words in silence, the air thick with tension and awe. Every creaking beam, every echoing footstep reminded them that they were standing in a place that few human eyes had seen, a place the Nazis had gone to great lengths to hide. Emerson's gaze swept over the room again, lingering on a small painting wrapped in oilcloth. He gently unwrapped it, revealing a delicate brushstroke, a sunlit landscape that had once hung in a French museum. The realization hit him fully. History had been stolen, preserved in secret, and now, for the first time, it was exposed to the light. The men worked cautiously, documenting what they could, photographing and cataloging in the weak flashlight glow. Every object, every ledger entry felt sacred and dangerous at once. They knew that transporting such a discovery would be difficult and yet impossible to ignore. This vault was not merely gold and art. It was a testimony to obsession, greed, and the meticulous planning of a regime desperate to survive the collapse of its empire. And yet, even as they marveled, a shadow of unease settled over them. They understood instinctively that what they had uncovered could change everything. This vault held the power to rewrite the story of Nazi Europe, revealing secrets the world had not yet imagined. For Emerson and his men, there was no turning back. The discovery was theirs, but so too was the responsibility to bring it to light. The sound of dripping water echoed through the tunnels, mingling with the distant hum of collapsing stone. The soldiers exchanged tense looks, a silent agreement passing between them. Whatever lay ahead, they were now custodians of history itself. The mine, the treasure, the ledgers, all of it had been hidden, secret, forbidden. And now, in the hands of a few weary soldiers, it had been exposed, shining brilliantly in the darkness, daring the world to witness the true scale of the Reich's obsession. News of the discovery at Merkers mine traveled fast, racing up the chain of command until it reached the highest echelons of Allied leadership. Within hours, a formal order arrived. The site was to be sealed, guarded, and documented. No one, not even the soldiers who had uncovered it, was allowed to remove anything without explicit authorization. The Americans had stumbled into something far larger than gold or stolen art. They had uncovered the epicenter of the Nazi looting machine. General Dwight D. Eisenhower himself was notified. Within days, a team of military engineers, historians, photographers, and clerks descended on the mine. The task was painstaking: catalog every item, photograph every crate, and ensure that nothing was removed without proper documentation. The operation, codenamed Safe Haven, transformed the mine from a secret hiding place into a heavily guarded nexus of historical investigation. Captain Emerson and his men remained on site, standing vigil at the mouth of the tunnels. They had entered the mine as weary soldiers chasing rumors, but now they were witnesses to history, guardians of treasures that had been hidden from the world for years. The scale of what they had discovered began to sink in. Gold bars glinted in the flashlight beams like frozen sunlight, coins stacked with meticulous precision, paintings carefully wrapped to preserve their fragile beauty. But beyond the wealth, the human story embedded in every artifact slowly revealed itself. As Emerson walked among the crates, he noticed the markings, the initials of European museums, the names of private collections, and coded labels that indicated the contents had been looted systematically. Each object carried a silent testimony of lives disrupted and lost. Gold coins and bars melted down from confiscated jewelry, and personal belongings told a story of confiscation, of wealth stolen in the name of war. Paintings that once hung in homes and galleries bore witness to the ambitions of a tyrant obsessed with immortality through art. Private Miller paused near a crate stacked with gold teeth and jewelry. His flashlight caught something delicate nestled among the metal, a small silver locket. He opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a photograph of a family, their faces smiling and unaware of the fate that awaited them. Miller stared in silence, the weight of their absence pressing down on him. "These aren't just treasures," he muttered to no one in particular. "These are people's lives." The men stood in quiet reverence, the enormity of the discovery settling over them like a physical presence. What had begun as a soldier's curiosity had grown into a moral reckoning. This was not treasure in the sense of riches to be claimed. It was evidence of systematic theft, cruelty, and the destruction of human lives. Each gold bar, each painting, each ledger page documented a story of oppression, a calculated plan to erase culture and claim power. Historians on site began to piece together the implications. Many of the stolen artworks had been looted from Jewish families, their names recorded meticulously in Nazi ledgers. Gold and valuables had been seized from homes, banks, and businesses across Europe, melted down or repurposed to fund the German war machine. Currency, coins, and precious metals had flowed through hidden channels, used to maintain the operations of a regime desperate to survive even as its cities crumbled. The soldiers, initially awestruck by the sheer scale of wealth, began to feel the weight of responsibility. They were no longer simply discoverers of gold. They were custodians of history and morality, standing guard over evidence of immense suffering and human greed. Emerson walked among the crates, noting the careful arrangements, the layers of secrecy, and the deliberate intention to hide these treasures from the world. The mine, once a place of secrecy and fear, had become a mirror reflecting the darkest ambitions of a regime on the brink of collapse. As the soldiers catalogued their findings, they encountered evidence that made the moral dimension of their task undeniable. A crate filled with confiscated books revealed volumes stolen from private collections, libraries, and universities. Religious artifacts lay beside gold and jewelry, each piece a fragment of lives torn apart. Emerson's men realized that their discovery was not simply historical, it was deeply personal. These objects were more than wealth. They were the embodiment of human loss. Miller could not forget the silver locket. He traced the edges of the photo, imagining the life of the family it had once belonged to. In that small image, he saw the human cost of war, the faces behind the statistics, the names behind the numbers. For a brief moment, the mine was no longer just a cavern filled with riches. It was a silent memorial to the lives stolen, families displaced, and cultures uprooted by the machinery of tyranny. Eisenhower's inspectors worked tirelessly, photographing and recording every artifact, sending detailed reports back to Allied command. The mine was transformed into a controlled site of historical preservation. Guards patrolled its entrance, Engineers reinforced the tunnels, and historians documented each crate meticulously. The operation became a symbol of the Allied commitment not just to victory, but to justice, to ensure that the stolen treasures were accounted for, their stories preserved, and their owners remembered. Emerson and his men watched quietly as the world arrived at the mouth of the mine. For all their training, all their experience in combat, they were unprepared for the moral clarity that struck them there. Here lay the tangible results of greed, obsession, and cruelty. Here lay the physical evidence of a regime's attempt to erase culture and history itself. And yet amid the gold, the paintings, and the coins, there was a haunting beauty, a reminder that what humans create, they also protect, if only fleetingly. As night fell over Merkers, the soldiers stood guard, flashlights cutting through the darkness, illuminating a mine that had once been hidden from humanity. The eerie silence of the vault pressed in, a reminder that even in victory, the consequences of greed and oppression lingered. Miller's locket remained in his hand, a small but powerful symbol of what this treasure truly represented. Not wealth, but lives. Not power, but suffering. The men knew collectively that their mission had changed. They had uncovered gold and paintings, yes, but more importantly, they had uncovered the human cost behind the glittering facade of the Third Reich. The vault was no longer just a trove of stolen wealth. It was a testament to the choices of men in power, and the lives irrevocably altered by those choices. As they prepared for the long night ahead, guarding the mine, Emerson looked at his men. He did not speak, but the weight of understanding passed silently between them. This was no longer a mission of conquest or survival. It was a duty to history, a responsibility to bear witness, and a solemn reminder that behind every treasure there is a story, often of loss, betrayal, and irreparable human suffering. The deeper Allied investigators delved into the Merkers vault, the more the true scope of Nazi ambition unfolded. At first glance, the glittering stacks of gold and masterpieces by Rembrandt and Van Gogh seemed to be merely a hoard of wealth. But the documents and ledgers uncovered alongside them told a far darker, far more meticulous story. A story of calculated theft on an unprecedented scale. The Nazis had not just taken art and valuables for immediate gain. They had orchestrated the largest art heist in history, targeting museums, private collections, and religious institutions across Europe. Archival photographs, carefully preserved, revealed soldiers and officials meticulously cataloguing looted treasures. Crates labeled with museum names from Paris, Amsterdam, Vienna, and Warsaw. Each shipment traced, recorded, and often repurposed to feed the machinery of war or satisfy Hitler's insatiable obsession with legacy. Among the recovered documents were letters from high-ranking officers, some even signed by Hitler himself, instructing subordinates to secure masterpieces at all costs. Every instruction reinforced a chilling notion. These artifacts were not merely possessions, they were the building blocks of a monument to his own immortality. That monument was to be the Führer Museum in Linz, Austria. Hitler envisioned a city-sized gallery, a shrine to his vision of cultural dominance, filled with works of art stolen from across the continent. Paintings, sculptures, and rare manuscripts would line the walls, a testament to his twisted conception of history and taste. The Merkers vault, hidden deep in the Thuringian salt mines, had been a crucial part of this plan, a secret repository meant to protect these treasures from Allied bombing and to ensure that, once the war was won, Hitler's vision would survive intact. Captain Emerson and his men, standing amid crates of gold and masterpieces, began to understand the magnitude of what they had uncovered. These were not random acts of theft. Every crate, every ledger entry, every carefully labeled package revealed a systematic campaign of cultural plunder, designed to erase histories, rewrite ownership, and consolidate power under a single tyrannical vision. The vault was not just a treasure trove, it was the blueprint of a delusional empire, frozen in time beneath tons of salt and stone. Investigators discovered coded correspondences detailing transfers between storage sites, movements from occupied territories to German strongholds, and secret instructions for cataloguing looted works. These letters, often written in meticulous bureaucratic language, carried an almost clinical detachment. One entry listed dozens of crates of paintings removed from a Jewish-owned gallery in Amsterdam, with instructions to catalogue them as property of the Reich. Another recorded the movement of gold coins and jewelry from private homes in Poland, reduced to standardized units of weight for easier transport. Everything was documented, measured, and controlled. For Emerson and his men, the realization was both awe-inspiring and horrifying. They had discovered not only wealth, but a meticulous plan that demonstrated the lengths to which the Nazi regime would go to preserve its delusions of grandeur. The gold, the coins, the paintings, all of it had a purpose beyond material value. Each item was a piece of a grand design, a carefully constructed facade intended to immortalize a man and his ideology. Archival photos recovered from the vault added a human dimension to the story. They depicted museum officials being forced to hand over their life's work, Jewish families stripped of heirlooms, and soldiers documenting every theft with precision. The faces in these photographs told silent stories of fear, loss, and helplessness. Private Miller, still clutching the locket he had found, felt the weight of these images pressing down on him. What lay before them in the Merkers mine was not merely gold or art. It was a testament to millions of stolen lives and erased histories. Deciphered ledgers revealed the sheer scale of the operation. Over 5 million cultural artifacts had been stolen across Europe. The Merkers vault alone contained a fraction of the total, yet it symbolized the broader ambition of the Reich, to control culture, to rewrite history, and to assert supremacy not only through military conquest, but through the manipulation of heritage and memory. Emerson studied the ledgers, noting the names of towns, museums, and private collections. It became clear that Hitler's obsession with art was inseparable from his vision of power. While cities burned, civilians starved, and the Allied forces advanced, the Nazi leadership had dedicated immense resources to securing these treasures. Salt mines, castles, and hidden bunkers had become depositories of stolen culture, intended to survive the collapse of the Reich and emerge as a permanent monument to its ideology. For the soldiers, the discovery became profoundly personal. The gold bars, once symbols of wealth and military gain, now carried moral weight. Every crate of coins, every painting, every ledger was a reminder that behind the glittering surfaces lay human suffering and a twisted sense of purpose. The Merkers vault was not simply a military prize. It was a chronicle of greed, delusion, and cruelty, preserved meticulously by the very people responsible for the horrors of the war. As Emerson and his men walked among the treasures, a silent realization settled over them. They were witnessing history in its rawest, most unfiltered form. The vault revealed not just what had been taken, but why it had been taken: to satisfy a tyrant's obsession, to assert control over culture, and to secure a legacy that could never have been earned legitimately. The blueprints of looting were as chilling as the treasures themselves. By the end of the day, the full scale of the Merkers discovery was clear. This was not just gold, paintings, or coins. This was a time capsule of moral corruption, a detailed record of systematic theft, and a testament to the power of obsession unchecked by conscience. Emerson understood that the mine held the story of Europe's destruction, of families robbed of heritage, and of a dictator whose vision of immortality had driven him to plunder an entire continent. Standing amid crates and ledgers, he whispered to his men, almost as if to himself, "We didn't just find treasure. We found the soul of the Reich's obsession." The vault, silent and heavy with centuries of salt and secrecy, seemed to hum with the weight of its revelations. For the Americans, it was no longer a simple mission of discovery. It was a confrontation with history itself, a confrontation that would shape their understanding of the war. the ambitions of the Nazis, and the fragility of human morality in the face of obsession. The day had grown long, and the Merkers vault buzzed with activity. Military engineers reinforced walls, historians photographed masterpieces, and soldiers guarded the tunnels with tense vigilance. Crates of gold, coins, and artwork were carefully catalogued, ready to be transported to Allied-controlled storage. Yet amid the bustle, a quiet tension began to rise among Captain Emerson's men. For all the excitement of discovery, unease gnawed at them. The glittering treasure, once awe-inspiring, now weighed heavily on their consciences. Private Miller lingered near a stack of crates, eyes fixed on the silver locket he had found. Sergeant Collins shook his head, muttering, "I can't help but feel like we're part of this, taking what's not ours." Emerson noticed the tension. He called his men together in a narrow corridor, away from the engineers and historians. The air was thick with dust and the scent of oil, the only sound, the faint echo of distant footsteps. "Listen," he began, his voice steady but low. "What we've found here, it's not ours to take. We're not looters. We're custodians. These treasures belong to history, to the people who were robbed, to the world. Our job is to protect them until they can be returned to their rightful owners." A murmur rippled through the group. Miller's voice was quiet but insistent. "But it's all here. We could take some, keep it. No one would know. Who's to say?" His question hung in the air, heavier than any crate of gold. Collins stepped forward, anger flashing in his eyes. "Are you serious? We've seen what this stuff cost people, families, lives, entire communities. We don't get to decide what's ours. That's not how this works." The argument grew heated, voices bouncing off the salt walls. Emerson raised his hands, trying to restore calm. "Look around you. Every bar of gold, every painting, every ledger page. This is the face of Nazism. It's greed, theft, and obsession made tangible. We can't lose sight of that. Our victory doesn't give us the right to profit from their crimes. It gives us the responsibility to make things right." The men fell silent, letting Emerson's words settle over them. The vault seemed to close in, the weight of history pressing down with every heartbeat. For the first time, they weren't thinking as soldiers, or as men hungry for the end of the war. They were thinking as witnesses, custodians of a moral imperative they could neither ignore nor escape. Then, a low rumble announced the arrival of a new presence, General Dwight D. Eisenhower himself. The men straightened, awe and tension mixing in equal measure. The Supreme Allied Commander walked slowly among the piles of gold and crates of stolen art, his gaze sweeping over the scene with measured disbelief. Photographers and aides hovered nearby, but Eisenhower paid little attention to them. His focus was the vault, the tangible evidence of the Nazi regime's crimes. He paused at the foot of a stacked wall of gold bars, placing a hand on a crate as though to feel the weight of history itself. The silence stretched, heavy and unbroken. Then his voice, low, deliberate, and chilling in its simplicity, cut through the tunnel. "This is the real face of Nazism. Theft, greed, and destruction." The soldiers exchanged glances, the gravity of the moment pressing into them. The general's words were not a condemnation of them, but a reminder of the moral context of their mission. Every ounce of gold, every masterpiece, every ledger page was a testament to human suffering and corruption. The treasures no longer inspired awe alone. They demanded reflection. Miller clutched the silver locket tightly, and for the first time he spoke, voice breaking slightly. "I can see them. The people this came from. Families gone. All of this. It's their lives stolen." Collins placed a hand on his shoulder, nodding silently. Even Emerson felt a chill, realizing that the mine was not merely a collection of material wealth, but a mirror held up to the conscience of everyone present. As the operation to move the treasure began, the soldiers maintained their vigilance. Yet their minds lingered on questions that no ledger or photograph could answer. How do you measure justice after such theft? How do you preserve morality in the midst of war? The gold, once cold and dazzling, now felt like a weight pressing against their hearts, a reminder that victory was never simple, never clean. In the days that followed, As crates were carefully transported under Allied supervision, the moral complexity of the Merkers vault lingered. Each soldier carried it silently, a private reckoning with what they had seen. They understood now that discovery was only part of the story. Responsibility, conscience, and historical truth were the burdens they could never leave behind. Emerson stood at the mine's mouth one evening, gazing at the fading light. Around him, the engineers and historians worked tirelessly, securing the treasures and documenting everything meticulously. He knew that what they were doing went beyond orders or duty. It was an act of remembrance, of justice, and of moral preservation. The vault, once a symbol of wonder and greed, had become a crucible of conscience. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the salt-encrusted walls, Emerson whispered quietly to himself, almost lost in the echoing silence of the mine, "We cannot change the past, but we can honor it. This is our responsibility." And in that moment, the Merkers vault was no longer merely a treasure trove. It was a test of human conscience, a reminder that victory carries with it not only glory, but the moral weight of bearing witness to history in all its darkness and complexity. The Merkers vault, once a hidden heart of Nazi ambition, was carefully emptied under Allied supervision. Crates of gold, stacks of coins, and priceless artworks were transported to Frankfurt, a city now serving as a center for securing looted treasures. Military trucks rumbled through quiet streets, their precious cargo a tangible reminder of the chaos left behind by the war. Guards patrolled every step, ensuring nothing disappeared, nothing was forgotten. Over the following years, a painstaking process unfolded. Art historians, museum curators, and legal experts traced the origins of paintings, sculptures, and artifacts, working tirelessly to restore them to their rightful owners. Families who had lost everything during the Nazi occupation received fragments of what had been taken. A portrait returned to a Parisian gallery, a chest of coins to a Jewish family in Warsaw, a delicate sculpture to a Viennese museum. Yet not all treasures found their way home. Some remained unclaimed, lost in bureaucracy, or because the original owners had vanished into history. Still, every piece carried the story of a life interrupted, a culture imperiled, and a civilization scarred by greed and war. The vault itself was resealed, the salt tunnels closed, and left undisturbed. But its story continued to echo, in history books, in documentaries, in whispered tales among soldiers who had borne witness to its horrors. The Merkers mine became more than a site of wealth. It became a symbol, a mirror reflecting human obsession, ambition, and the corrupting power of greed. Those who had uncovered it could never forget the weight of its revelations, nor the silent voices of the people whose lives had been stolen. Captain Emerson, now older and far removed from the chaos of the war, reflects in a voiceover, "We went looking for victory. What we found was a mirror, showing what war does to men, to nations, and to souls. The gold, the paintings, the ledgers, they were never just objects. They were the embodiment of a regime's obsession and a testament to what is lost when ambition outweighs conscience." As his voice fades, the screen slowly dissolves into archival images of the Merkers mine discovery. Soldiers standing awestruck amid piles of gold, paintings carefully wrapped in cloth, ledgers detailing the meticulous theft of Europe's cultural heritage. Each image speaks to the enormity of the revelation, leaving the audience stunned, reflective, and aware of the human cost behind what might otherwise appear as mere treasure. The salt tunnels remain silent now, holding secrets and history alike. The treasures live on, their journeys continuing, as reminders of both the fragility and resilience of human culture. In the end, the Merkers vault is more than a cache of gold or art. It is a lesson etched into history, a cautionary tale of ambition, greed, and the enduring responsibility to bear witness.